G5 is an incredibly fast chip. It's so fast, so powerful that it requires extraordinary cooling. We've designed the new PowerMac G5 with 4 distinct thermal zones. Now, with thermal sensors in each zone, you can actually cool them independently. And that's important because it means we can cool them quietly. In fact, it's 2 to 3 times quieter than the G4.
Hello, I'm Greg Rutke of Rutke Mods, and welcome to episode 10 of my PowerPC series. In this episode, we'll be introducing you to my mid-2003 PowerMac G5 dual processor 2.0 GHz model. Now, this was the top-of-the-line PowerMac G5 you could get in 2003. It was the fastest, and if you want to watch some videos about it itself, the introduction, talking about it, and the first commercial for this specific computer, you can click this link up here, and you'll be taken to episode 5 of the PowerPC series, where I introduce you to my late 2005 PowerMac G5. In this episode, we'll be covering this PowerMac G5 right here, showing you some differences between the two models, and showing you the performance difference. And here's a spoiler alert, they're essentially the same. And it's actually quite impressive what this thing can do, but it is a dog compared to the late 2005. This wasn't really, it didn't seem like it was quite finished in its production quality. But still, it's still a very good and pretty reliable system, and still can be used for every modern day task essentially, especially in Linux. In fact, this runs Linux better than the late 2005. Also, if you want to reference the performance differences between these two systems, you can watch episode 5, which of course is up in the link above, where you can see the operating system's performances, and basically they're the same. So anyway, let's get started, and I'll show you this system and how it performs. Okay, so before we begin, let's go over a little more PowerMac G5 model history. Aww. I promise this will be pretty quick. Now, through the whole history of the PowerMac G5s, from mid-2003 all the way through late 2005, there was always a dual-core 2.0 GHz model. When I say dual core, of course the first 3 versions were dual processor, and then the last version was actually literally a dual core. Now, the first generation model, the mid-2003 model, was the highest end you could go. The mid-2004 model was actually the mid model, and the early 2005 model was the low-end model, which only had PCI in it. It didn't have PCI-X. Now, when the late 2005 model came out, it was still the low end, but it still was actually very powerful and had all the features of the 2.3 GHz and the 2.5 GHz quad core, minus the faster processors and stuff. But it was essentially the same model, and all the processors could be swapped around in them, except for the quad core setup. You could use one of those 2 CPUs in that system. But other than that, it was the same system. Anyway, getting back to this. This is the mid-2003 PowerMac 2.0 GHz dual processor. Let's take a look at it. Okay, so of course this was the very first Mac to have the beautiful aluminum chassis that was carried from 2003 all the way to when the trash can Mac Pro came out. So that was roughly a 10-year span. So this is the first system to have the aluminum case, and of course it's not the world's most durable case. As you can see right here, there is a bend in it. Just like all of my aluminum towers, there's a bend in them somewhere. So that's a little drawback, but it's actually a very sturdy case as long as you don't drop it. Anyway, the front and the sides look the same on this compared to the late 2005 Power Mac. But there are some differences, and I'll show you that. But first, let's show you the back. Now, the layout's similar to the late 2005 model, but it's not totally the same. Looking to the back of this, we have my Sonnet Aria card right here, the wireless in card. It's the one that's from my Quicksilver over there. I moved it over to this system, and it and my MDD are going to get Airport Extreme G cards in them. So anyway, that's what this card is right here. Under it we have a USB 2.0 card, which on the inside port has my Bluetooth 4.0 adapter in it. So I have Bluetooth through there. Then we have the 9600 Pro. It's a 64 megabyte video RAM model. They also had a 256 model, and then you also had the option for the 9600 XT, which actually outperformed the 256 Pro by a little bit. I have the 128 meg version in my MDD now, which I moved from my Quicksilver. So anyway, that's that. And I'll be eventually upgrading this card to a Radon X800 model. I think it's the XT model. It was the most powerful video card you could get, and in fact, I believe it's more powerful than the 7800 GT that's in my late 2005. But anyway, so that's this card. It's got DVI and an ADC port, which we'll be using to power that monitor right there. Then we've got other ports down here. Now these ports are different on the late 2005, which I'll show you in a second. But these ports right here will help you identify a PCI X model compared to a late 2005 PCIe model without opening the case. So anyway, right here we have a port for the Wi-Fi antenna. If you have a built-in Airport Extreme G card, which I actually have in this system, it came with the system. I can show you a picture of the antenna right here. It just clips right in there, and you have more stronger signal. But in fact, this system actually has a pretty strong signal without the antenna. And if I really, really want one, you can even make the antenna out of, believe it or not, a bread tie. But anyway, under it we have the Bluetooth antenna port if you want to plug one of those in. But you of course have to have a Bluetooth module installed, which I don't. So that's that. Then down here we have optical out and in, the speaker jack, audio in, two USB 2 ports, a FireWire 400 port, FireWire 800, a gigabit Ethernet, and a dial-up modem. Then we have the C13/C14. I can't remember quite exactly which plug this is. One's called C13, one's 14. It's the, it's that power jack. So let's quickly compare the back of this to the late 2005 model, and then we'll jump into the inside of the case. Okay, so my late 2005 is on the left, and the 2003 is on the right. Anyway, this is the back of these two systems. If we look right here, the easiest way to identify the late 2005 models is with this piece of plastic right here. That's on all of those, and it was never on the PCI X models. Also, if we look, the ports are different. The late 2005 model did away with the antennas, going for an all-internal antenna setup, and it added an extra Ethernet port, while sacrificing the dial-up modem and adding an extra USB 3 port. And of course we have the C19/C20, I think, adapter here. This is a C19 plug compared to the C13, and that's literally the difference over here. The power supplies on these, I actually think, pull a little more power. These were higher rated, and with the quad core setup, I think these actually pull more power, but the single processor models, the dual cores, I think use less power than these. So if anything needed, the C19 was this model. But either way, they still don't pull enough power to really need a special cable, which I can't figure out still why Apple did that. But that's basically the back of the systems. So let's hop into the inside of the mid-2003 model. Okay, so it's time to open the famous aluminum side door. And of course, since the corner of this is a little bent, it might take me a little more to get it out. But still, it's basically the same opening as carried on all the way through the Mac Pros. So anyway, let's open up the side. And I'll push up on this. And it comes right out. And this is the insides here. We have the acrylic divider here for the airflow, and this is actually very essential in these systems. These run hotter and much louder. In fact, the late 2005 model is nearly whisper quiet compared to this thing. This thing is loud, and we'll be showing you that in a second. But let's go on to the insides here. Now, to tell the difference between a mid-2003 Power Mac G5 and the mid-2004 and early 2005s is the covers on the heat sinks were actually separate, as we can see here. In fact, I actually like this design's appearance better. But, you know, that's that. The mid-2004 and on also had this all sealed off here. And if we look at this compared to the 2005 model, we'll see that the 2005's cooling was actually a lot better. And that's why it was so quiet, because it really didn't have any air gaps. And the G5 actually ran cooler in this because it's more efficient. But this is, of course, how it compares to this. Now, I haven't totally cleaned out the case of this. I've just removed most of the dust I could without actually taking the whole thing apart. Now, I have removed the CPUs and replaced the thermal paste. And also blew out the heat sinks. But the fans still haven't really been cleaned. And I haven't gotten down to the power supply yet. But now I'm not dying every time I turn this on. So the dust really isn't a problem anymore. Anyway, if we look on the inside, of course we'll still see the dust here. But this is the inside of the system. And we can see the PCI X slots here. Of course, those are still regular PCI slots, only more powerful. It was literally the transition slots between PCI and PCIe. And it extended the longevity of the PCI slot for a bit longer. But anyway, in the top we have my Wi-Fi card. Then we've got this USB card. This is a very interesting USB card because it's some kind of generic Chinese card, and none of the plugs here were actually soldered onto the board. The pins were, but the shields weren't, and I nearly snapped this port off, so I had to solder those on, and I'll show you some pictures of that. But that's basically the only cheap thing about this card. It works great otherwise. Then we've got the video card, which of course I'll be upgrading. I'm going to pause the video real quick and pull this card out so you can see the AGP Pro slot. So let's get to it. Okay, so I've removed the card, And just as a quick comparison, we'll show you the difference between this card from a G5 compared to a G-Force card. If we look down here, this is my G-Force 4 MX and my 9600 Pro. Anyway, we can see the locking tooth is in a different location, and that the ADC charge port, electrical port, is in a different location. It would be here on this card if it wasn't snapped off. But that gives you a general idea, and this is why. This is the Pro slot. Now, the Pro slot was only really used by the 5200 Ultra from the factory cards. Later on, I believe the aftermarket cards also had Pro slot capabilities, but this slot was never really used in any major systems. The 8x Pro, 8x AGP cards were about it. But as we can see here, we have the ADC power. ADC was killed off in the early 2005 models, but it kept the Pro slot. And that's basically what the AGP's Pro slot looks like. If we go up to the top here, I have replaced the Super Drive with a Super Drive from a late 2005 Power Mac because it's a little more reliable, and you really can't tell the difference other than, it's got a October 2005 production date on the top. Other than that, it works great. I decided to replace it because the other one had a lens problem. It needed adjusted, and the best I could get it to do is read single layer DVDs, which was an improvement over its original problems, but still, dual layers are what I need it to read when I'm installing operating systems like Leopard. So replacing that was important, plus I'm not sure if the other one actually still burned. In here we have my 2 terabyte drive. This has Tiger, Leopard, and my Ubuntu Mate install on it. Then down here we have 2 operating systems I'm never really going to use, but I will be demonstrating to you, and I just want to play around with them. This has Jaguar on it and Panther. This system could run Jaguar, but it was a different kind of Jaguar. It was specially made just for the G5s, and it came out as 10.2.7 on the Restore disc. And the Restore disc was only released for the models that came out between the mid-release date into October of 2003. So it was a few months in that span period where you could get Jaguar with the system. Later on, the models shipped with Panther, and that's the other operating system that's on this. But getting back to the Jaguar install, it is a totally different operating system. It looks identical, it works identical, but it's like comparing the PowerPC version of Tiger to the Intel version of Tiger, though this, of course, has all the capabilities of a normal PowerPC install for the G3 and G4s, but it has the G5 support, and it has none of the coding for G3 and G4, which makes it a very interesting operating system. I think you guys will enjoy at least taking a quick look at it. Anyway, so that's the whole inside of the system. So let's put it together and let's boot it up. But before we do that, I also want to show you that when you remove the internal shroud here, the fans actually do ramp up in this system. Apparently, the late 2005 models, they were so efficient in cooling, it really didn't matter if you had the divider in or not, and that's why the fans wouldn't ramp up. But this one will, and they ramp up quite loudly. So anyway, let's get into it. Okay, so I just have the power connected. Before I start it up, though, I did forget to mention that this has 2 1 gigabyte sticks of DDR in it. I am going to eventually be upgrading it too. 8 gigabytes of RAM instead of the 2 gigs in it. But right now, 2 gigs is plenty enough for everything I need to do with it. Though I think the 8 gigs will really make it fun. Anyway, getting back to the point. Let's power this system on, and you'll hear the differences between having the shroud in and the shroud out. If you ever get a PowerMac G5, the PCI models, if it is really loud when you turn it on, it's probably missing the shroud. And you'll probably have to go out and source one, or you can still cover up that eye in there, and it should make it less loud, but then you'll probably have cooling issues too. Anyway, let's power on. Okay, so that's about how loud it will get when it's idling. But if we take the shroud out, then we put the shroud back in, it goes back to normal. And that's just a safety feature. Of course, this system has software-based sensors too. Actually, I think these are more hardware-based than software like the late 2005 model. But it's still basically software-based, and you can still read the heat sensors too, which you couldn't in earlier Macs. So anyway, let's actually literally get into the operating systems here. Okay, so before we begin, I would like to mention again that this system is running the first generation G5 CPUs in it, which ran pretty darn hot. They weren't very efficient, and this system seemed to be kind of rushed in development. The later generation G5s ran cooler, they were more efficient, etc., and they just continued to keep getting better. Now, when the system is under any kind of load, the fans will ramp up, which can get a little annoying. So this system is much louder, but other than that, it performs identically, really, to the performance of my late 2005 G5. And, like I said before, take a look at that video. If anything, just skip towards the end and you can watch the operating systems and how it performs online and stuff. I'm not going to go into super detail about Leopard and Tiger just because it performs the same. In fact, I'm not going to really show you how the internet performs on this system here because I already demonstrated that on the late 2005 model. But I will go into more detail about Linux because this system has a hardware accelerated supported video card, which actually works, unlike the late 2005. So Linux actually runs better. Now, even with the 2 gigabytes worth of RAM, it's still plenty enough for what we need to do with it, and it works quite well. I can't complain, and you know, I will be upgrading it either way. I'm going to max it out, but for the time being, it's okay. So anyway, let's boot it up. And since it's connected to an ADC display, we can just start it from the monitor. So let's do that. And it's going to start loading up Leopard. Now, a common problem with the first generation G5s is it had a lot of coil whine, which was probably from the power supply. There was a recall on it, and you know, there wasn't a whole lot you could do about it otherwise. This has some coil whine in it, but it's still not a huge deal. And this system, like I said before, is still very, very usable. And now we see that the program that allows you to connect the Wi-Fi card in this system, like I demonstrated to you in the Quicksilver video, has popped up. It's an annoying pop-up, but hey, it works. The card only works in Leopard and Tiger. It won't work in Panther and Jaguar. And luckily the built-in Airport Extreme works in those two, but you actually need the Airport software update for it to connect to my WPA2 Wi-Fi. It will connect to it, but I just haven't gotten around to installing the airport update, so currently it won't connect to anything other than unsecured or really old encrypted systems. So anyway, this is Leopard. We'll open up a browser real quick. Let's close this out. Got that closed. We'll open up WebKit just to show you that it is connected to the internet. We'll go to Google. And here's Google. We have the internet, and it works quite well. We'll show you that it really is Leopard. And that's basically about it. It's just a normal install Leopard, nothing special about it. And it works totally fine. It's very snappy, and it has super quantities of power to run Leopard with no problem. So that's Leopard. So we'll restart the system, and I'll go into the boot menu, and we'll go into Tiger real quick. Okay, and so here's the boot menu. Now this is a more refined version of Open Firmware boot menu, unlike earlier G4 boot menus and stuff. But this isn't the refined later version of Open Firmware's boot menus, where you still had the keyboard controls. You can't select anything with the keyboard, but you can with the mouse, and as we can see here, it's a lot smoother. So anyway, let's go to Tiger. And here's my Tiger install. We've got the wireless utility kicking on. Of course, this is just a plain old Tiger install, and it works great. So we'll close out the utility real quick. And we'll just quickly show you that it is running Tiger. Nothing too special here, just plain old Tiger. It's got Classic installed. I haven't started it, but it's got Classic on it. And you know, I've demonstrated that on the other G5 video, and well, there's not much of a point to show it otherwise. So anyway, let's get into Panther. Okay, so we're about to boot into Panther, and I have Classic auto load when I boot into Panther and Jaguar, and that's just for programs like Classilla support. Of course, I can't show you Classilla with no internet, but we can open up Classilla just to show you that it does work, even though we won't have any internet. So let's boot into Panther. And here's Panther. We can open up Classilla. Of course, it won't do anything, but we can load the app and show you that it is running Classic. Here's the Classic bar, and that's where it says there's no internet connection. But like I said, it does load up and it does work. And we can see that I've actually turned off the airport card because it just automatically connects to my neighbor's Wi-Fi, and it's annoying because I don't want it to do that. So whenever I fix that, I'll probably make a video on how that works too, but for now. And here's the interesting thing. The Bluetooth 4.0 adapter works. In fact, it works quite well. That's a shocker. It works good. And Bluetooth 4.0 was way before Panther was made, after Panther was made. And here's the Panther info. You know, it's Panther. So anyway, let's boot into the fun operating system. The strangest of the bunch, the oldest of the bunch, and one that really I might cover a bit more about. I haven't really played with it a whole lot, but hey, let's do it. We'll actually boot into Jaguar and show it off to you a little bit. So let's do that. Now it's time to boot into this 15-year-old operating system and show it off to you. And welcome to Jaguar. As we can see here, it's the G5 variant. Like I said, this will not run on a G3 or G4. It will only run on a G5. And it's pretty darn cool. This operating system is so different than the later OS X installs. And it's got a lot of OS 9 elements still in it, like the Apple System Profiler, which is quite similar to OS 9's, as we can see here. And one of the really neat things is the Bluetooth 4.0 even works in this. I don't know how, but it works, and it works quite well. There's a few other neat things about Jaguar. First, let's open up Classilla again for the heck of it, just to show you that it also still works on there. And there it is, and of course we have no internet, but still. And I actually still have the airport card active on this. It's just not connected to anything right now. If it will cooperate with me. Here we go. And Jaguar had a lot of other applications which didn't exist in later versions of the operating systems that came out. For instance, here's the clock app. This was killed off in Panther. And as we can see here, it just displays a clock. And it's got a lot of neat little features. And this is also Tiger compatible. It will open in Tiger with no problems, which is really, really impressive. It won't open in Leopard. It will run, but it won't run. You can open it, but it won't do anything. You can even change the options in the program, and it won't do anything. But it will work in Tiger, and I'll show you real quick. And here is the clock app running in Tiger. Right here. And we can change the menu options and turn it into, for instance, we can make it a floating window, and it works great. We can also switch it to digital, and that works too. And we can always just put it back in the dock. And there it is. And we can switch it back to analog. Boom. Works great. Okay. And after showing you that, this has also got other really neat things. We'll open up the Finder, which this wasn't, I think, called Finder back then, but it's cool. It's really cool to see this stuff. There was other neat things, like the process utility. My mind's going blank on the name. System utility. I think that's it. It didn't exist in Jaguar. This was the last operating system that didn't have that. In fact, this program was actually split up into Process Viewer and CPU usage. The CPU monitor here, which is pretty darn cool. And the neat thing about this is this program will even load in Leopard, which I can show you right here. And here is CPU monitor running in Leopard. It works totally fine. Pretty darn cool. It possibly will open up in Snow Leopard using Rosetta. And I don't know if it supports quad-core CPUs, and I don't know if it supports Intel CPUs. But it will run in Leopard, which is pretty darn cool. So anyway, that's basically all I can show you about Jaguar right now. I'm still learning the huge differences, but you know, the styling is different. It's got like pinstripe styling that is a lot more pronounced. the windows, the buttons on them kind of float, which is pretty cool. And you know, that's Jaguar. So anyway, let's get to the meat and bones of the very ending of this video, where we show you Ubuntu Mate and how well it actually runs on this. Okay, so we'll start off by showing you the real time of the Linux boot up, and it boots up a lot quicker than the late 2005 G5. It's probably because it has less drivers to load and not load. But anyway, let's get started. And there it is, roughly a minute long, which is very, very, very respectable for a Linux install. Now, of course, this has also got the same Bluetooth module in it as the late 2005, so it will pop up an error message probably. There it is. But of course the Bluetooth works. I have no clue what it is with this build of Linux, but it works. So anyway, we'll show you a few quick things, and then we'll jump on to the internet. So let's just show you System Monitor real quick. And it uses a lot less resources. It's quite impressive how efficient, and it runs better on this, and everything's hardware accelerated too, which probably helps. So anyway, let's get into the Firefox install and show you how it runs. Now, if you want to see how Linux actually runs and see some more things about it, again, you can watch the ending, the last few minutes of episode 5. And I'm just not going to go into great detail about it. But what I really want to show you is with this system, running YouTube, for instance, runs smoother on Linux. Runs a lot smoother. In fact, you can run 480p with no problem, and it doesn't lag as bad. And also, I hear that you can run, I've tried this, the audio sync seems to be out a little bit, but you can run 720p, and I haven't tried 1080p because I don't think my video card is quite powerful enough even in Linux. But some people do get 1080p to work. And also in Leopard, you can use plugins to allow 1080p. I think it downloads the video file, then you can play it, and then. But anyway, getting back to the point, you can stream 1080p in Linux. I'm just not going to show you something that powerful. Also, I forgot to mention that right now we're connected with the in card. And as we can see, it literally sees it as a Wi-Fi card, which is pretty darn cool. So anyway, we're connected with that right now. Let's load up YouTube. And here's YouTube. So let's go in and watch some videos. So I forgot to sign into my YouTube first, and I wanted to do that just to avoid the ads. I have YouTube Red, so it makes everything a little easier. But anyway, as we can see here, we're loaded up in YouTube. It is a lot snappier, and it works a lot better. So anyway, let's load up a video real quick. In 2003. And PowerPC, now with the audio that I had in Linux for this machine, it was a little more challenging to set up, but as we can see, I was successful, and it works great now. Everything's a lot quicker in Linux, and as we can see here, right now we're streaming in 360. We can change this to like 480, and it will do 480.
Is a very different processor in this model.
Now we can show you that it's still doing 480, like that. We can also show you that it can do 720, but it does lag some. I'm sure there's ways to get around the lag and stuff. I just haven't really tried yet. And it's actually pretty smooth. And as we can see, it's at 720. So now with full screen, you can do 480 in full screen pretty well. But I'm just going to show you real quick what 360p looks like. So we'll go into full screen. And here's full screen at 360p. And it works quite well. And it's just a much quicker, snappier, setup. It's quite impressive what this can do. So now we'll do a quick Google search of me just to see how quick it is. It's very useful, very quick, very snappy. You can't just, it's just impressive what it can do now. And that's Linux with hardware acceleration. Hardware acceleration's awesome on this. And it just makes Linux so much better. So anyway, that's Linux. And that's my mid-2003 Power Mac G5. Anyway, so that's the end of this video. And like I said before, if you want to see the performance that this can actually do in the other operating systems and what else it could do in Linux and stuff, see episode 5. But anyway, once again, that's the end of this episode, and thank you for watching. This has been a Rutke Mods video.